got dreams and ambition.
Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of La Platas on a rocky mountain high. Get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. It is Sunday, October 13th, Monday, October 14th for those of you across the pond. Welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Hope you had a rockin' weekend and an awesome rest of your week. I am your host, TessaTNT, and we are live tonight on Spreaker, Periscope, Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, CastBox, Tumblr, YouTube, SoundCloud, and TuneIn Radio. So tonight I have a treat for all my guys and gals out there. Tonight we will be talking to and getting to know RL Poole. RL Poole is a high-functioning autistic person with an untestable IQ who has been researching Ed Leedskalnin and the Coral Castle for more than 14 years, and what he has found is amazing beyond words. Using his unique mind and an uncanny ability to not only recognize but also solve the riddles left behind by the brilliant On magazine, the York Daily Herald, as well as 2 appearances on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie in February of 2017, then on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie again by popular demand in 2019. Beyond reality radio, and has recently filmed an episode on the new hit television show The Unexplained on the History Channel featuring his revolutionary discoveries about the Coral Castle, and was just named Author of the Month on Graham Hancock's website for the month of January of 2020. And now he will be on with us at We Are Paradox Media. Look for RL Poole at future lectures on upcoming television shows, radio interviews, and magazine articles. RL Poole is a member of American Mensa and lives the quiet life in Pennsylvania. Hey, RL, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you back.
Well, thank you, and thank you for such a nice introduction. I sound super important when you say it all out loud like that.
I love your work and what you do, and man, you've put so much time and effort into it, and I'm just amazed by the different codes that you have broken and different realizations that you've made.
Well, thank you, and I have to say thank you for your support of my work. You are an enthusiastic and avid supporter of what I do, and what I do doesn't mean a thing unless someone like yourself is helping me shout it from the rooftops. And I just want to say thank you for having me back on your show.
Oh, no worries at all. And congratulations on being Author of the Month. That's so amazing. Like, I bet you're just kind of beside yourself with that.
Well, it is, and it's by who it's from, Graham Hancock. I mean, this is a guy I've, kind of worshipped from afar for a long time. And yes, Graham, I'm the source of those weird Post-its on the fridge. I'm just a fan. And what I really like about him is that he challenges the norm. He upsets the sacred cows that we have built into our culture and our intellectual culture as a society. And he challenges those things with real facts. And he has been, I think, a charismatic advocate for the value of truth over education.
So what got you interested in the Coral Castle and Ed Leedskalnin in the first place?
Well, when I was a boy, and I saw In Search of, and I was a Leonard Nimoy fan even then, and I remember hearing that kind of droning voice he has, the narration, which always gave it such mystery. And the episode I watched was called The Castle of Secrets. And I saw this little guy who supposedly could do miracles, and no one could figure out how. And I was small and kind of a sickly kid, and I was fascinated by the fact that someone who was small like me was not powerless. They were powerful. And it was because that it wasn't about the size of his body, but about the size of his mind. And I was captivated by the idea that he could do things that people 3 times his size could not do. And that got me interested. And then later on, I'd looked back into it and said, I wonder if anyone had ever solved that or had figured it out. And what I found was no one had solved it. In fact, there was really a lot of disinformation that I found out, a lot of poor deductive reasoning, leaps of logic, just intellectual backflips that people were making to try to make sense of this, which told me it was still a very powerful mystery that should be solved. And for some reason, and I don't know why, but it beckoned to me, and I answered that call. And it's been a pretty interesting and exciting journey ever since. I always liken it to, I feel like Ben Gates, and this is my national treasure. I find a clue, and I solve a clue, and it leads to another clue, and so on. And I forgive the people who think Ed Leedskalnin is crazy. It was just that he's not crazy. It was just that he was so far ahead of the curve that you couldn't even see where he was. And I have been unraveling him with my best efforts for the past 14 or 15 years. And I feel like I'm just now starting to get a foothold on what it was exactly that he was leaving behind for us.
Yeah, it's quite an amazing feat that he had built this place, not only once, but twice. I mean, to be able to move it and recreate it, and it's just mind-blowing, like, how'd he do that? Is what I wonder.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because that's one of the clues to me. You see, one of the things that I've always found fascinating was when I discovered that the Coral Castle is not the accomplishment. It is the evidence of the accomplishment. It is the discovery of a scientific principle that no one knows. And what do you do when you are a scientist? You can't just do something once, right? If you do something once in the laboratory, it's a fluke. You have to have repeatable results, verifiable and repeatable results. And I believe that was the reason he moved it, was to show that it wasn't a fluke, that he could do it again. And he did. And I believe this cements this principle. Whatever it is that I'm digging out is sound, and it was tested scientifically.
So there's a lot of theories about why he built the Coral Castle in the first place, and one of the stories being, a lost love. A lot of people think that that's rumor. What do you think this real story is? Is it to prove that, you can actually somewhat defy gravity?
Well, I think that if we could, and I know this is difficult for people. Well, it was difficult for me when I first started doing this, is if you could let go of the principle of gravity for just a minute, and if you assumed that everything is magnetism. What does gravity do? It attracts things. What does magnetism do? It attracts things. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills sometimes, but they're the same thing. So if we look at it, what I have come to terms with, and I preach this to anyone who will listen to me, is that what Leedskalnin proved, among other things, is that gravity is just an expression of magnetism. And he built the Coral Castle using these principles to show that not only does it work, but it will work better than anything you can do. Anything you can physically do with a machine, I can do better without it, just using these principles that he, and I believe he discovered them from the Egyptians. He rediscovered them. And he put it together and then created the Coral Castle as the proof of concept, and then left the secret hidden in the Coral Castle itself to be discovered by some bored person like me later on to pass on and to see for ourselves with our own eyes, touch with our own hands, the evidence and the proof that what Ed Leedskalnin is teaching us is correct.
So what was your initial approach to this project?
It was informal, but it was strict. And when I say that, I mean that I did not adhere to many rules of investigation, except for one, really. It was my one sticking point, was that absolutely nothing, just forget everything I've ever heard, been told, read, anything about the Coral Castle. To literally start from zero and go from the ground up, and only listen to the most trustable source on the issue, which was Ed Leedskalnin himself. So I forgot all of the folklore and the stories and the Sweet 16 and all those things, and I just started educating myself with the written works of Ed Leedskalnin, most specifically Animal, Vegetable, and Mineral Life and Magnetic Current. These are my two favorite publications of his. And reading them for about it was like going to boot camp for your mind. I would just read a sentence for 2 weeks, just read it over and over and tumble it over and over in my head and extract the actual meaning. He was so precise with words. He did not waste a single one. And the things he would say, it takes a minute to get what he's really saying. He has a very direct way of saying things. And he is very literal in his interpretations. So it became a challenge to not only understand the concepts that he was teaching, but also the way that he communicated them, because English was not his first language, yet he was extremely efficient with the language. And he would say things that I, as a native-born American person, would have to read for 2 weeks and go, okay, what is it? Oh, that's what you're saying. That's okay. I see. And then I could move on to the next sentence. And that's how it started, was I wanted to really, really understand what he was saying and not write him off as a laughingstock or an eccentric or any of those things, which, by the way, I don't see how eccentric is an insult, but people have always said, well, the eccentric Ed Leedskalnin. And eccentric just means smart in a way you don't understand. That's how I interpret it, because the more I have read about him and read from him, every single time I almost have to master a new discipline or a new field of study just to keep up with him. He was a philo-polymath of proportions that I have never encountered. His mind seemed limitless in its ability to process information. And I believe that this was his superpower, for lack of a better word, was perception and his ability to process it. I've never seen anything like it. And he was able to demonstrate this even now in a way that is over our heads, because people will drive by the Coral Castle every day and they will not stop and stare at it in awe like they should. It goes over our heads even now. And it's because a lot of these things are just now coming to light. For instance, the 2 booklets that I was talking about that I read, if you overlap the covers, it creates a schematic, a hidden diagram that he's had hidden, separated on the covers of these 2 booklets, that one day I just put one cover over the other after watching Iron Man and seeing him do it. And I was looking down at the books and I was like, I wonder. And I walked over and held it up to the light of the front door window, and these things match, a 4-point lock. It's real. It's a schematic. It changes the game. It did many things. It proved that he left the secrets behind, that he did leave secrets behind, that these secrets speak to something bigger. How that can possibly be ignored once you know it, I have no idea. And I don't think you do either, which is why you keep having me back.
Yeah, it's just amazing all the effort and time that you've put into it. And, not only do you do these lectures and your channel on YouTube, but you've also built part of the, I don't know if you want to call it a machine or what he had put together. I think it's called the Perpetual motion holder. I'm not sure, but how much time and money and effort did it take to build this, and what exactly is it?
You ask such great questions, and you are exactly right. It is the Perpetual motion holder. You've done your homework. I know you know this subject almost as well as I do by now, probably. But yeah, I built a Perpetual motion holder, which is to Ed's very exacting standards, and they come right out of the book. If you read Magnetic Current, it tells you how to build one, and his instructions are hilarious. Take a 1.5-inch thick steel bar, bend in a U. If you just stop right there, that's step 1. Just take a 1.5-inch thick bar of steel, bend that into a U shape. Most people are confronted and defeated at step 1. So I consider pulling this off one of the Herculean tasks of my life that I've been able to perform. But you have to have the prongs 13 inches long, no more than 3 inches apart. That has to be 1.5 inches thick steel. And you have to have a bar that goes across the top. And then you need coils. And these are large aluminum or brass coils. Mine are aluminum. And you now have to wind 1,500 turns per coil of size 16 gauge magnetic wire, as close to the bend as it will go. And those are his exact words. So there were several nights of me just having a great time, just sitting alone at a table and spooling wire by hand, very slowly and carefully, until cramps would not go away. And then you put a piece of tape over it, you go to sleep, you hope for the best. And sometimes I wake up in the morning and, it's all uncoiled. I'm going to have to do it all over again. And then, so it took me months. It took me, I don't know, well over $1,000 just for materials, my time, all that kind of stuff. But it was totally worth it, because once I built it, I was able to see other things, and I could see how the hidden part of the schematic goes on to the Perpetual motion holder, which I've added on. And it's a master class. It's a master class if you go to the trouble to build one, which I know they're expensive and a lot of work, and really just a big, ugly, expensive paperweight to most people. But for me, it was a lesson. And what I realized is when you put this hidden diagram piece on there, this turns it from a locked, closed magnetic system into an open and flowing electrical system. That seems important to me. And it seems like it was important to Ed too, because he hid the two components from each other very cleverly. And then even when you read his book, the very first paragraph of the book says, when you read this writing, you will be facing east. And everything you read about magnetic current will be just as good for your electricity. Now, just off the bat, that sounds like this sounds like this book is going to talk nonsense to you. This writing's lined up so when you read it, you face east. What does that mean? You're facing east. How does that help? Wait, hold on a second. Oh, yeah. What happens when we face east? North is on our left, south is on our right. He's telling us the polarity of the device that we have built. And he says everything you read about magnetic current will be just as good for your electricity, because he knows once you found the hidden part, it will change it from a magnetic device into an electrical device. So he lets you know, hey, the polarity of the magnets will also be the same as the polarity of the electricity. So there you go. You see what I mean? Like, this is how he has hidden things. And he's hidden it in plain sight. And they've been hidden in plain sight for decade after decade after decade. And it's things like this that need to be looked at and studied and appreciated. And, forget me, take me out of it. Just look at what I've found is what I ask of people. Just look at what I found and see what it tells you, and apply some of these principles. And let's see what there is to be discovered here. And I feel like Tesla talking to Edison sometimes, you know how I feel.
Yeah, I don't know the words to put to it. But Space Alien in the Spreaker chat, actually it's Periscope, was wondering, so the levitation technique, what's the consensus? Was it sonic or using gold cones as a focusing lens?
I don't believe it was either of those things. In my opinion, I believe that Ed Leedskalnin was able to manipulate the magnetic field of the planet using a celestial alignment and his own electrical and magnetic devices, one of which being the perpetual motion holder. And I believe what happened was that he discovered a secret that has been used by the Egyptians, by the Mayans, Toltecs, just anyone who has had a megalithic culture. It is because they knew this secret. And on the planet, the sun, moon, and then the earth, it's very reminiscent of another thing, which is a trigger mechanism for a Gauss rifle. And it looks like a ball bearing, a large neodymium magnet, a ball bearing, and then a ball bearing. And there's a magnetic field. It is just simply pulling the magnetic field up a little bit, and the stone just comes up with it. That's what I believe.
Yeah, he was saying it's interesting, the direction you are reading east is the Rosetta Stone, and he said also, as a question, okay, the devices were a component of this manipulation of fields. I'm wondering what role did they play in this process? And I think he said that you somewhat had answered his question, but he started off with the comment, interesting the direction you are reading, being east, is the Rosetta Stone. And then he also said, okay, so the devices were a component of this manipulation of fields. I'm wondering what role did they play in this process?
Oh, okay. Very good. So my theory about this is that he had the perpetual motion holder, which has a north side and a south side, and it's a very large device. It was about 37 pounds. It's 37 pounds of steel and copper, which, by the way, he has you build, he says, just to do experiments. I don't know about you, but I've never spent thousands of dollars and hours of my time trying to do an impossible task to do an experiment. So, you know what I mean? So obviously it's important, but it is important because I think the perpetual motion holder is what is in the black box at the top of the tripod. If you extrapolate and scale the size of the box with the size of Ed and the tripod, what you get is a box that is almost exactly the same size as the perpetual motion holder. It's actually just an inch bigger, according to my calculations. I even built a box based on the measurements I found, and the perpetual motion holder fits in it, like, perfectly. And I believe that this was used to run electricity through, and this creates a magnetic field. And this magnetic field disrupts the magnetic field under it. pops it like a bubble and allows this field of magnetic buoyancy to occur, where anything that is not actually part of the planet will float above it for a short time.
Well, and I thought it was interesting, that on the north wall, there's a stone that weighs over 30 tons, and this megalithic stone is bigger than any tripod that Ed had used in terms of base and height, so on and so forth. So, that's where the whole, magnetic thing, like how do you lift something with something that isn't even as big as that? It's hard for me to wrap my mind around it.
Well, it is until you realize he's not lifting it. I mean, obviously, the 30-ton stone is bigger than any tripod he had. It's wider than any base of any tripod. It actually is too large to have been lifted out by any tripod he had height-wise. The mechanics of it just simply break down if you do the engineering math. If you wanted to use a lever, okay, just a lever, to lift that stone out of the ground 10 feet, you would need a lever that was 148 feet long, made out of a substance that would be light enough at 148 feet long for Ed to move. Then you need a fulcrum that could withstand not only the 60,000 pounds on one end to move the stone, but the 22,222 pounds you'd need at the other end of that 148-foot lever to just get equilibrium with this thing to just move it 10 feet up. That's just equilibrium. That's the kind of weight we're talking about. We are talking about impossible, megalithic size stones being moved by a man who was 5 feet tall, 100 pounds soaking wet, and probably couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag with a razor blade in both hands. This guy was not a strong person physically, but he was extremely smart and strong mentally. And he used every single principle that he could find to his advantage in order to do things that no one else can do with brute force. And with magnetism, it's easy.
And Space Alien, again brought up, have you talked about any accounts of him levitating stones with gold cones? I don't think I've heard anything or read anything about gold cones being used. He said he thinks he heard a story about neighborhood kids seeing him do this.
There was, okay, I think I understand what he's referring to as far as the gold cones. They said it looked like he was holding something that looked like it might have been a microphone or like an ice cream cone or something like that he was possibly humming or singing into. And it is extremely possible that this is true. One of the principles that I found researching this is the principles of the old wall telephone. And you see it kind of written, and I know this is a weird angle, but go with me on this for a minute, is the first thing you see when you go to walk into the castle is he has a bell and it says ring twice. Okay? Now, when you used an old wall telephone, which would have been around and very common in Leedskalnin's day, you had to turn the little magneto wheel on the phone twice, and it would ring the bell twice, and it would send a signal down the line, and it would prime the line with electricity. Okay? And then the operator would pick up on the other end, and they would speak. And when they would speak, the voice would travel back along that current that has already primed the line, and it would be received by the person on the other end wanting to make a phone call. They would acknowledge that the line had been primed, and then they would answer back. And this is how a phone call was placed. Well, this could very well be the case here. Is what does he have? He has a giant magneto wheel, right, in his workshop, and he sends current to the perpetual motion holder, and he wants to make sure that that phone call, that current has gone through the line. So he might pick up a microphone and speak into it and make sure that that travels back up the line so he can ensure that the line is primed with enough electricity to carry the signal that he intends to send.
Very interesting. And you had done a video on this as well that I remember watching. In your book, you were writing about how years later Ed had hidden a portion of what makes this whole design complete. Why do you think he separated the pieces of the diagram?
That's an excellent question. I believe it was because he set up, not only did he hide this piece, but so many more in such cleverly and maddeningly undetectable ways. I believe that this was an intellectual contest. This was a prize to be won by the person who could see it, discover it, riddle it out, and put it together, just like he did. I believe that Ed was kind of a hard man in that way. He did not believe in charity, giving things to people. He believed in earn it. And I believe that's what this is he's leaving it there and he's making the game fair, but only if you know you're playing it. And he has left so many clues. I look at the east wall of the Coral Castle and I say, I see. Right at the entrance sign that says Spica, and then in there it looks like Spica. No, that is Spica. And then, this, and now I have to master all of the constellations and all about celestial alignments and all the different kinds of celestial bodies, all these things. And that's one clue. And then that one clue will take me 6 months, a year to master, figure out, completely nail down. And then it leads me to another clue. And he wanted this person, whoever got this, to understand the value of it. If you, I think, just give it away, people will not value it. They will not treat it properly. It must be discovered organically, like he did.
Yeah, and I think he worked very hard for it. Like, he wasn't just given this information. Didn't he spend a lot of time in the libraries just going through so many different books about Egyptians, so on and so forth, to figure this out? Or do you think he found it out some other way?
I believe that he found it out by looking at the past hieroglyphs of the Egyptian culture. And I think he learned Egyptian. I really do. I think he learned Egyptian, and he interpreted it differently than the people who originally had. Seeing these things, and with the accompanying graphics and the carvings that go along with this text, I think he was able to decipher how things were done. What I believe makes him the linchpin for all megalithic structures is that this is the only person who's ever built a megalithic structure in modern history who spoke English and seemed very interested in leaving the principles behind. Any other culture, you could drop me off in the middle of Egypt and say, here, go solve it. I'll never get there because I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know. I don't read ancient Egyptian. I don't understand the context of the hieroglyphics I'm looking at. You go to other Machu Picchu, or you go to Pumapunku, which is a dream of mine. You go to Pumapunku and you look, and there is nothing there to tell you what is going on. But we have a person who was in the United States, who lived within the last 100 years, who built the only megalithic structure in modern times, and he built it specifically to leave the secret carved into it. I think that's important, and I think that makes him the most important person to study when it comes to megalithic structures. I think there's no other name in the business, Ed Leedskalnin, because when you study him and you discover his methods, I believe they all fall like dominoes at that point. They all are solved.
So another question from the chat room is there a possibility that the use of monatomic gold has worked into his process of levitation?
I guess I would have to, it's a difficult question for me to ponder. I suppose anything is possible unless we know the exact method that was used. I believe that it is impossible to rule out anything else. However, my flummox here would be at what would be the application of that. I am unsure. This person's very interested in gold, by the way. I've noticed monochrome gold, gold cones. But it is possible that gold is used, especially when you consider, and I will give your listener credit for this, the tons of inexplicable gold that they had in Egypt. Just a shameful amount of gold. And where? I don't know where it came from. But they did seem very interested in gold. And it would make you wonder why. Why would gold be valuable to them? You can't eat it. Gold doesn't keep you warm at night. Why the big fascination with gold? And I think when you look at other cultures who have been very successful in the megalithic category, you do see an obsession with gold there. And so I think that there's a lot of smoke in that question, but there's a little fire too.
Yeah, I think perhaps gold is a good conductor of energy, and there's so many different things that they could have used it for. I'd heard that on, some of the pyramids, the top portion of the pyramid was actually plated in gold at one point. But you hear
it was a gold cap, or maybe even a solid gold cap. Yeah, that it would be stolen and what have you over the years. But yes, I heard the same thing. And when you look at Ed's tripod system, and then you look at the pyramids, doesn't it look like that was the tallest tripod they could build, and built everything they could within the four sides? Boy, tropical storm this at one point, and then it became Hurricane Agnes and then made landfall. At the time, it was the most powerful and expensive hurricane to ever hit the United States at the time. And not a single stone at the Coral Castle moved an inch. I think it's also very interesting that Hurricane Agnes, which was supposedly the name of his lost love, Agnes was the name of the hurricane that directly hit the Coral Castle on
right.
that day. Sweet 16 indeed.
Can predict that.
It didn't move an inch.
Yeah, it's very...
and I'll tell you...
Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, I'll tell you for free that of all the structures that we have to worry about, the Coral Castle is not one of them. I do see there has been some weathering over the years, of course, and oolite limestone and calcite coral. These do break down like anything else, but for the outstanding majority, I'd say 95% of the castle is going to be intact 500 years from now. It will still be there, even if we aren't.
So is the Coral Castle actually made of coral, or is that limestone?
Well, it is part of it's oolite limestone, and then the other is calcite coral. And they're very similar as far as their properties are. As far as the composition of them, they're crystalline structure rock, which does not make them helpful. It makes them actually very finicky to work with. They tend to break and snap, and they don't cut even, and they have unexpected fractures and weak spots and holes and missing material, and they're both nightmares to work with. And he made it look easy. He made it look like he was playing with clay, which is also another conversation that we can have. Because I do think that when he was manipulating these stones, when he was carving them, I believe that they were the consistency of clay. And there's a lot of evidence to support my assertion when we talk about the slap marks that you see in a lot of the pieces of stone. These are not depressions made from brute force of a 5-foot tall man slamming a sledgehammer into a piece of spring steel down into solid bedrock coral about 1.5 or 2 feet. I'm a pretty good sized guy. There's no way you're doing that. But what we see, very interesting, instead of compression, what we see is displacement. And there's an important distinction to that. Displacement means that this material pushed to the side and allowed the slat to pass through. And we're talking about slats about 3.5 inches wide, about 1/2 inch thick, and about 3 feet long. And these look like they were knocked in like you would knock down a yard sale sign in your front yard. Easy. The displacement shows that this material was soft, like clay or like mud. And I think, again, this is another clue back to Ed Leedskalnin's magnetic model of the universe. I believe that when he does this technique, he uses water. Water gets poured onto the coral, is subjected to this electromagnetic field during the time of this celestial alignment, and Robert's your father's brother. And what happens is that the magnetic bond between the water and the coral disappear, and they merge and become one substance. And if you do the math between extremely hard and brittle coral and completely soft and no resistance water, I think what you get right in the middle is something that's along the lines of sandy clay. And that is exactly what seems to be demonstrated by the displacement and the slide marks. Slide marks in solid bedrock coral from a steel wedge being driven in by a 5-foot tall man who weighs 100 pounds. I find it difficult to believe. See, this was easy. I believe all of the work was the prep work involved of getting the materials together, of knowing the principles, of knowing where to be, of the right time, of having all this stuff set up and then ready to go. And then once you do, well, then, yeah, cutting the big slabs of stone, getting them on down the road, not so hard. It's everything else you have to know to be able to do it that's difficult. He even said himself, it's not difficult. The secret really isn't just knowing how. And I believe him.
And it's pretty interesting how he'd generally wait until, everyone would go off to sleep or whatnot. He'd work at night, generally, on this when he was first building it, correct? To keep it a secret, because like you said, you don't respect the process unless you really work for it like you have.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. I believe he worked at night for a couple of reasons. One is practical, because I've been down there many times. It's hot. If I'm going to do work, I'd like to do it at night when it's nice and cool myself. Secondly, I believe that he was timing himself and building things like the sundial that he has down there. I think that sundial is not really a sundial. It's a moon dial. And that he was working on it at night. And he was marking it appropriately as the night passed. And I say that because most analematic sundials, it's the curved surface ones, they look like a bowl. They usually tell time from 4 to 9, usually, isn't it? And his tells time from 9 to 4. That's weird. And then I realized, because it's not counting regular time, it's counting what's called sidereal time, which is sun time. And what he's doing is he is counting off hours of right ascension. They're not normal hours like our daytime hours. They're hours of right ascension. And he's timing hours of right ascension because he's timing celestial alignments. And he is timing them so well that he can carve them in huge size on a wall. And I could make them out enough to get a specific date and time. I mean, this guy is at a level of genius that it's a level of magnitude that I can't comprehend. There's no end to him, and even with all the work I've done, I feel like a beggar compared to him. I just, I'd love to just meet him and go, hey, was I a good boy? Did I do good?
Right.
How'd I do? I figured some of this stuff out, and I'd have all these little bits and pieces, and I'm sure he'd pat me on the head and say, oh, you poor man, you're so close. It's right there. And you didn't see it the whole time, did you? But he certainly have gone to great lengths to help someone like me try to piece it back together again. And he created a wonderful thing, and then he kind of dismantled it so it couldn't be accidentally stumbled on. I think when you find it, it has to be on purpose. And I think that that's my purpose.
Well, I'm so glad that you're doing this, because a lot of people, don't take as much interest in it. And I think it's, priceless information that you've kind of stumbled upon. And do you know if Ed Leedskalnin completed school, or was he just, naturally smart and kind of educated himself to a certain extent?
No. Well, I have a 2-year technical degree from York Technical Institute and specialized technology, but I have a GED. I'm an autistic person. I have what's called Asperger's syndrome, and I'm considered in the high functioning category of the autism spectrum. And it means that I have certain kind of hyperactive abilities. And then I have others which are deficits. So for me, I excel at memorization, pattern recognition, deductive reasoning, memorization, those kinds of things. I'm untestable. Like they don't even know where my limit is because I exhaust the limits of the test. But if you had tested me in math a few years ago, you would have seen where those deficits were because I was extremely bad in math. I have weird issues like finding my way around, even though I've been there a million times. I won't remember because I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered to remember because I have other things to worry about or think about. And so it creates these odd problems, but it creates odd opportunities as well. And one of them is I have a heightened sense of perception, and it's hyper focus. That's what it is. I have the ability to focus on a single subject or thing for an unbearable amount of time in comparison to other people. I'll watch the same thing over and over a million times. If I see value in it, I'll look at something, study it, think about it, and focus on it for a long time until I crack it. And I think really that's all it is I have the ability to see what other people ignore and put those things together in a way that makes sense. And sometimes I'm right. And in this particular case with Ed Leedskalnin, I feel like I get a lot of hits that are correct about his work. It makes me wonder if he was autistic as well, because some of his behaviors and some of the descriptions of his behavior and mannerisms and thoughts, and even the way he left the puzzle pieces behind, kind of speaks to me of like, I think I understand why I get this more than other people do, is because I have that perhaps same thing. Now, I don't want to put out there that I said, Ed's autistic, but it makes me wonder.
Yeah, you never know.
Because we think so similarly. Like I pick up on stuff that other people wouldn't get, but I'm like, see, this is how it is with other autistic people. Like they'll say things to me and I'll go, I know exactly what you're saying, but they couldn't say that to anybody else and get the same reaction. And that's the kind of closeness I feel with Ed. I feel like, I understand how you think. And he spoke in very literal ways, but also kind of confusing ways as well. And I like that.
Yeah, and it seemed like he was really into riddles, and it's very interesting how he left different hints behind. And like you said, with those two covers, and you put them in front of, the window or whatever and let the light come through, it just totally made sense to you. And I don't think a lot of people would have even considered doing that, And, I don't see anything wrong with being autistic. I have a couple nephews who are, and one of them in particular, one day we were out, I think it was on Easter or something, a family deal, and he was playing with a deck of cards and kind of, spraying them into the air and then going and picking them up, but he wouldn't pick up the ones that are closest to him. He was doing it in a certain order, and the more I watched him, I'm watching the order in which the cards are coming out of the deck as he's spraying them into the air, and he's actually seeing the order in which the cards are coming out, even though it's at such a fast rate, but he's picking them back up in the order that they came out. And I was just blown away by that. Like, how do you do that? But it's like you said, like
that's even almost in the savant realm of ability. That's something even I would find to be a daunting task. That's amazing.
Yeah, it really blew me away, and I'm like, this is genius. And a lot of people, think of it not in a positive way, but I mean, if he could implement that in his life somehow, I mean, it was just amazing. Like, how could you memorize those numbers in which they're coming out at such a high rate of speed and then pick them up in that order. I was just blown away. And
because I'll tell you why, because something else is not working. Like, so full power is faced like right at that task there. And so this happens to me. I will be on the trail of some task that I'm doing or some problem I'm trying to solve. And then somebody will ask me, hey, when was the last time you ate something? And I'll go, oh yeah, you know what? It's been a couple of days. I should go eat.
Yeah.
Or sleep. Or I don't think about those things. I get so focused on my task that it is to the exclusion of other things, and sometimes, unfortunately, people as well. I'm a terrible email and text answerer, as my friends will famously tell you. But it comes with that great ability comes with great deficits as well. And this is what I would really hope that people would start to come to accept and understand, and kind of be gentle with autistic folks, because I've never met one that didn't mean well. Even if they're misunderstood, they mean well, and they have incredible gifts that far surpass their deficits, and that we're worth putting up with.
I totally agree with you there. But like you said, you get so focused. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I refer to it as the Sherlock syndrome. I'm not always kind about other people's feelings. I'm in the middle of something and they're talking and I'm like, shh, thinking, hello, okay, there we go. And people are like, okay, like, all right, Mr. Important. It's like, it's not that. I can't be distracted right now. I can't. You have to stay on the track, and you don't want anything to get you off of it. And so people think that you're just rude or mean, and it's like, no. Just, if I lose this, I may never jump back on this train again. So let me take it all the way to the station. And so it's like that kind of stuff where you're socially kind of inept, and you have those kinds of issues, but you also can have brilliant insights. And what we need are great people like yourself, who's the middle person there, who's like, hey, this guy sounds crazy, but he's actually not. And I'm going to tell you why. And here, listen. and sometimes people will listen to you more than they will me.
Well, yeah, and when I think of you, like, crazy is the last thing that would come to mind if I were to explain you. But on that note, we do have to go to our first break. And on this break, we'll be listening to Mystique, If I Slip, Dancing Machine by Prime Example, as well as Devil You Know by Michaela Hay. We'll be right back right after this musical break.
I got dreams and ambition, I'm ready and I'm willing, I'm meeting this competition. You don't wanna be my dinner. The whole shift changed when the music bang. Love the look on their face. I got dreams and ambition, I'm ready and willing, I'm meeting this competition. You don't wanna be my dinner. The whole shift changed when the music bang. I just love to see the look on their face. And if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I got dreams and ambition, man. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I'm ready and willing, even if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I'm meeting this competition. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. You don't wanna be my dinner. I'm about to do this to death, cause I know they watching. Don't understand the talking, tell that dog to quit barking. I'm an entrepreneur, so correct when you talking. Bet I get it back and take a loss to be a boss. Coming fast and I'm switching lanes with it, crisscross. Never messing with you, rapping ratchets, what you really thought. And my jab steady dreaming, chasing missions for the fam. Understand I'm flowing lands from the Milwaukee brand. Thought you knew you can't wear my shoes, not do what I do. It's a mob, I don't pick or choose, just sticking to the rules. Keep my beast above and beneath. They know I'm beauty. What you need, I got what you need when it come to it. Who been grinding all winter, so the summer extra lit. I've been in and out the pray up my greatness. It ain't no time to play with it. And if I slip, I'ma bounce right back. Cause I was born for this. I got dreams and ambition, man. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back. Cause I was born for this. I'm ready and willing. Even if I slip, I'ma bounce right back. Cause I was born for this. I'm eating this competition. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back. Cause I was born for this. You don't wanna be my dinner.
With great precision, I'm on a mission. Lots of ambition, my transition. The time was ticking, willing and wishing. Just listen, I punch harder than Sonny Liston. They fishing, looking for teeth. It look like Lipton. They tripping. I am the king whose competition. Collisions, conclusion is I'm in a position. Lifting, transcending beyond their comprehension. Time to hang it up, swaggerific, the lynchman. You know how this goes. Just follow the street codes. We make it look easy like we putting in cheat codes. Beauty and the beast is in beast mode. Haters on the sidelines, I tell them to keep score. I go crazy on the beat, tell Spaz to keep it low. You know Mystique close with a toaster, you won't toast.
And if I slip, I'ma bounce right back. Cause I was born for this. I got dreams and ambition, man. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back. Cause I was born for this. I'm ready and willing. Even if I slip, I'ma bounce right back. Cause I was born for this. I'm meeting this competition. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back. Cause I was born for this. You don't wanna be my dinner.
Just got home, shower, get my clothes on, spray my perfume on, then I grab my phone. I'm about to hit the road, I'm going to the club, I'm about to pull up, I'm going through the door right now. I'm saying, man, all these guys in here is going down in here, but I came here to get my groove on, got my dancing shoes on, time to have some fun tonight. So come on, baby, 1, 2, cha cha cha. Get on the floor, we can dance non-stop. Step, 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 we can do it all night. Baby, come and dance with me. Tonight we will be like two dancing machines. Can you hang with me? Tell me, baby. 1, 2, cha cha cha. Get it on the floor, we can dance non-stop. Step, 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 we can do it all night. This is how it's supposed to be. Just you and me, like two dancing machines. Can you hang with me? Tell me, baby. Look like they hating on us, 'cause I keep catching the buzz. Tonight we erase the world. We about to tear up this club. Just you and me, like two dancing machines. Can you hang with me? Tell me, baby. Keep dancing, keep dancing, keep dancing, keep dancing. Are you ready with me? Are you ready with me? Two dancing machines.
We both had a long day, time to blow some stress off. You working with the best, I'ma dance your pants off. I really love it how your body's so soft. Dance all night, little lady, it's your call. Step, 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 baby, follow my lead. You and me showing off for the club to see. No time to get rest, we doing our thing. Cha cha, then we dip, top it off with a spin. Glide across the floor, let's do it again. By the way, little mama, can we be friends? I can't let this night just end. I really wanna know if I can see you again. Give me your number, we'll get back on the scene. We can hit another club if that's your thing. We'll be partners in crime, you and me, as we ripping up floors like two dancing machines.
so near. The warmth of a home in a chandelier, shining down its light on love, wishing you'd be closer. The curtain's nice, but what it hides is worse than sticks and stones. Before you climb the fence tonight, look through the microscope. Better the devil you know. 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 Before you climb the fence tonight, look through the microscope. Better the devil you know. Better the devil you know. Better the devil you know. Better the devil you know.
Welcome back, guys, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. Tonight we are joined by RL Poole. Hey, RL, welcome back, and thanks so much for hanging out with us and educating our listeners and myself.
Well, I'll stop. Tess, you are the best, and thank you for having me back. I enjoy interviewing with you better than anything else.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad it's not, you don't feel like my victim or anything. So I'm glad you're enjoying yourself.
Not at all.
As am I. But I don't know where you want to go from here, but I did have a couple more questions from our Periscope chat. And a space alien was wondering about the subject of magnetic properties found in certain corals. He said that coral tends to be affected by magnetism when forming, so that may be sympathetic to cosmic alignments.
Oh, it's very interesting. Very good. Because it has a crystalline structure, so that, of course, does seem to speak to magnetic properties, doesn't it? And it also speaks to resonant properties, which I see why people do have those kinds of ideas. And I think those are valid. And until we really start doing experiments to see what happens when we subject this kind of material to these principles that Ed Leedskalnin talks about in a very specific way, I think that these are all possible doorways into this secret world of physics that Ed Leedskalnin has discovered and left behind for us.
So, that being said about coral, does limestone have any crystalline properties to it as well, or is it just a different stone that he chose to work with?
Oh, well, limestone does also have a crystalline structure. And the thing that I noticed about coral is that it's porous. Of course, you can pour water right over it, and it soaks in like a sponge. And I think that actually had a lot to do with his choice of the next place that he chose to build out of. I think he wanted to use this water technique with something that was porous and crystalline and subject to magnetic fields. I think that was one of his secrets of raising the 30-ton stone. I don't know that he would have been able to do that at his other property.
Space Alien was also saying in 2016, a UK-Brazil team created a standing stationary sound wave that negated gravity in the focused area within their tripod of ultrasonic transducers. So, holy crap, he says, did Ed use focused vibrations to levitate?
I don't think that he used it to levitate. I think that he was simply able to negate and it's possible to use sound to do this. But we have to understand that just because one way is possible does not mean that other ways are not equally possible. And by way of different principles. You may be able to raise something up sonically, but you may also be able to do it magnetically as well. I don't believe that he necessarily had to use a sonic type of vibration to lift the stones out of the ground, but could have been very useful for helping guiding them to the spot that he wanted them to be at, because you could set up a field where you could have them travel along a sound wave that you could push the stone and it would simply go to that limit and stop. And then when the effect wears off, when the alignment starts to move out, then the stone will rest and settle on exactly the spot that you want it to, because he built it to very exacting standards for being a giant megalithic structures that he has put together. They're very accurately done, which means he had to have a system for doing that. It wasn't just, it wasn't slapdash. He put a lot of detail and thought into this, and I think that would be a kind of system that he might use as a sonic system of placement for him.
He's got some really good questions going on over in Periscope.
I'm a roast. Baste me. Let's do it.
Right? So you're saying in your book, the adding the missing part of the secret schematic turns the closed system of magnetism in the PMH into an open electrical system, which you believe might be used in conjunction with his magnetic wheel, which is still able to be seen at the Coral Castle Museum.
That's right. That's right. So what we have is he has a large magneto wheel made from Model T magnets, and I am recreating one to go with the Perpetual motion holder. Slow going, but I have all the parts that I need. It's simply a matter of construction and time and drill bits, apparently lots and lots of drill bits. But I believe that what he was able to do is create this electrical field by spinning the magnetic wheel, sending current. And now here's the tricky part. This is the part where Ed's like a magician who tries to do the impossible but fool you into thinking it's just mundane reality. It's like the opposite of a magician. So where we have all these chains and everything, those I don't believe are chains. I believe they're wires. They are current carriers that go from the magnetic wheel that he has in his shop to this day and goes through the chains to the Perpetual motion holder, where he goes up and connects the call. And I believe there's a DC battery up there as well. I believe there was a DC battery that was hooked to part of the Perpetual motion holder, and then the other part ran down, and those chains wrapped around the stone, and current would be passed through them and into the stone. Kind of like if you ran a Tesla coil in reverse. That's the best way I know how to put it, is if you ran the current back through a Tesla coil, back down to the block. That is the effect that is happening here. And when we find out that the Perpetual motion holder has a missing piece, you build the Perpetual motion holder, the experiment he would have you do with it is you take a bar and you put it across the top of the two prongs, and then you zap both of the coils with direct current from a battery. And it will lock this bar on in perpetuity for as long as you'd like it to be there. That bar will not come off on its own. The magnetism will not go away. And this was what he was saying was the perpetual motion. It is not the device. It is what is flowing through the device. The magnetism is the perpetual motion. And he proves that it is perpetual motion because it never weakens or goes away over time. He created a closed, locked system of magnetism that shows that magnetism itself is perpetual motion. Now, we add the other part of the schematic on, and what happens is that this opens these coils up, and now the current flows through and not stays trapped in a circular orbit within this magnetic device. So now we have an electrical device. And why would we have an electrical device unless we had current that needed to go from one place to another? Now, the Perpetual motion holder on its own, it does not generate current, but it would simply, it would ramp it up and it would push it back out again. So we have the generator wheel, which would generate the current. We have the perpetual motion holder, which would amplify the current and also direct it. And then what do we have left is where should it end up, right? Where does the current go? And I believe it goes right into the block that he has saturated with water. And during this time of celestial alignment, when there is a syzygy and these equators are lined up and these magnetic fields are pushing against each other and creating the right momentum, up it comes, and it levitates itself above the ground. And you can just simply push these into place. I know. It sounds like it shouldn't work. But my only argument is that it did. That's all. That's the only argument I have, is that he did it.
Repeatedly.
Yes, and he did it more than once, yeah.
Dennis was asking, what about ley lines, PowerPoints, layovers, interchanges? Do you think any of that had anything to do with how Ed had built the Coral Castle?
First, Dennis, thank you for your question. And yes, these guys, they know their stuff. They're on the right track here. Because what we're talking about is we have to reverse engineer the history of ley lines and stuff, these PowerPoints. What are these PowerPoints? What are these ley lines? They are lines that have been recorded through history that along this path, something really interesting magnetically happens. Well, what they have done is they have accidentally mapped all of the PowerPoints during different celestial alignments over the entire history of humankind. They just didn't know that's what they were doing. They're like, oh, something happens on this line. Yeah, but not every day. Not every day. Only at certain times, certain periods. And I bet if you go back in time and you find out when that ley line was discovered, I bet you'll find out there was a celestial alignment that caused it to happen. Because these forces are invisible, but they are passing through our planet. They are passing through us as we speak. We are saturated, inundated, created, governed, controlled, and destroyed by magnetism. We are fish who do not know we are wet. We live in a magnetic universe, and we swim in it. We live in it. We are absolutely created by it, and yet we do not see it. And it is my hope that by publishing the book of my findings, by researching Ed Leedskalnin, giving him his proper due, and presenting his revelations in a way that people can not only understand, but also be able to accept, is what I hope to do for future generations, like Ed did for me.
So Space Alien in Periscope was saying, I find it amazing that he levitated with a system that didn't also tear the material apart or stress it out in any way. And he's asking if current is being passed through any soft, non-crystalline structure would have its magnetism altered. Do any of the magnetic blocks have any material not of the same structure, like dirt in the coral, perhaps clay?
Rephrase that for me.
He was saying, let's see, let me go back. If current is being passed through soft, non-crystalline structure, would its magnetism be altered? Do any of the megalithic blocks have any material not of the same structure, perhaps like dirt or clay?
Well, some of them are oolite limestone and some of them are bedrock coral, and those are two different substances. We also have, and this person is correct, that if you pass a soft, non-crystalline substance, it changes the magnetism of that. Now, interesting, if you go over to the 30-ton wall at the Coral Castle, the north wall, and you hold a compass up to it, it spins.
That's interesting.
Yes, it is. It's very interesting. Also, he carved out the back of the 30-ton wall, and I'd like to thank Laura May, the curator and manager of the Coral Castle, for giving me a personal tour when I was down there shooting the History Channel show, The Unexplained. And we stood back behind on the back of the north wall, and she said, here, take this many paces up. And she said, I want you to just just say anything as softly as you can. And I was facing the wall, and I said very softly, "Can you guys hear?" And they were like, "Yeah, we heard you like you're standing right next to us." The echo coming back off of this concave section of the north wall in the back made it like a loudspeaker. It was amazing. And again, this goes back to your friend Space Alien on Periscope. There's some of their arguments about sonic manipulation, because this was a natural amplifier that he built on a grand scale that had to be purposeful because it's so efficient. When we talk about the different types of materials, the one material that is, I believe, again, invisible, but was very useful, was water. And water is a diamagnetic substance. In other words, water doesn't like magnetic fields. It repels them. Water pushes magnetic fields out of itself because it disrupts its system. So what happens is we can saturate a crystalline structure with water and then inundate that with magnetic current. And the diamagnetic substance of the water will push this excess magnetism out and into the next substance to it, which will be the coral, which is much more accepting of it than the water is. And this overloads this crystalline structure with magnetism and gives it not just intrinsic, but excess and active magnetism. In other words, it just doesn't have the magnetism that holds its molecules together. It has enough that it creates its own field. And then once it creates its own field, now we have the perpetual motion holder up top who can now control the field that has been created through it. In other words, because they're linked and it is creating a field, it is now subject to the perpetual motion holder that gave it the field of magnetism.
Yeah, and Space Alien was saying it's some sort of parabolic speaker.
Oh, the 30-ton wall of the Coral Castle. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Also, it would be a fantastic way to check for the resonant frequency of that particular substance, wouldn't it? That if you had something that amplified sound, then once you hit the frequency, because every type of matter has its own resonant frequency, and it would be a fantastic way of not just testing, but amplifying the resonant frequency of that material once you found it. Because the resonant frequency that people keep talking about, and I think there is some validity to, maybe what actually helps this stone maintain its structure during this magnetic process is that it is held together by this sonic blanket that's around it, that may keep it vibrating but keeps it cohesive at the same time. And I think that's valid as theory.
There's so many amazing things that he did with the Coral Castle, and one of them that comes to mind is the extremely large door that generally you could push with a pinky to open, but wasn't that broken and they still haven't been able to figure out how he had done it in the first place?
That's exactly right, Tess, and it's called the 9-ton gate, and they have footage from years ago when Ed was still alive of a little tow-headed little guy, little looks like 2 or 3 year old boy, cues a button. He walks right up to the 9-ton gate and just leans against it with one hand and walks, and the door moves. He swings 9 tons of stone with one little chubby baby hand, and the reason was because of how well balanced it was. He had carved a stone that weighed 9 tons in a roughly rectangular form with rounded edges, and then somehow was able to drill a perfectly balanced and symmetrically centered hole through the center of the coral without cracking it, and then inserted a truck-bearing shaft into it, and then balanced that on a piece of stone, and then set the door in place perfectly balanced so that 9 tons was balancing on a single point so perfectly that it took no effort at all to move. After a while, this truck bearing rusted and broke down as you know, things are wont to do. And Now, Ed supposedly did all this by himself on his own, and they had, and I spoke to Laura May when I was down there this last February, and she said it was more like 20 men and 2 cranes, and they still could not get it right. 20 men, 2 cranes, all the brain power in the world, couldn't figure out how to do it. One of the secrets is that the truck bearing was resting on this. It's a pie. It's a piece of stone shaped like a pie. It's just a flat, like just a slightly convex, flat top stone that they cannot identify the chemical composition of. They don't know what kind of stone this is. And again, this goes back to my theory that Ed was somehow able to break the magnetic bond between matter. That perhaps this is a new type of stone that he created by mixing 2 together, using this effect, and created an entirely new substance that would be up to the task of supporting that kind of weight for an extremely long time. Every single thing about the Coral Castle just leads you down a rabbit hole to another mystery. Everything he did was so enigmatic that you walk away scratching your head, or in my case, banging it against a wall, trying to figure out how much more genius is there to him. And the answer is always more.
So I was reading that the Coral Castle was not originally called the Coral Castle. Do you know what it was called?
Yeah, it was called Rock Gate Park by Ed. That's what he called it.
Wow.
I
never knew that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was the original name of it when he built it in the first place. And then it later was just kind of colloquially called the Coral Castle. And then because of that colloquial association, later on when it was purchased again and turned into a museum to preserve his work, it was called the Coral Castle Museum now. This is what it's referred to. Yes, Rock Gate Park was the original name that Ed had given his structure.
And you have been to the museum several times. Obviously, they don't have everything there, or else they would be able to show you, give you demonstrations on how you would do this. What part of what Ed was using do you think is missing from the parts that they have?
Well, the truth is, I don't think there's much missing. His Perpetual motion holder, I have not ever seen or found. I found a single picture of it, one that he took, and it has the missing piece on it that I found on the booklet. The 2 leads that come off that are connected to the coils. The picture actually shows it rigged up that way. But the Perpetual motion holder is missing, which is not a big deal because I have the instructions, we all do, on how to build them. We have the hidden part of the schematic, which we can add to it. But it is... Okay, so Ed was able to build this out of junk. What he needed was something not sophisticated at all. Every bit of it came from a junkyard or scrap or stuff people had thrown away. I don't think there was a new piece of anything that he bought or used. Everything was recycled or free or junkyard, anything. And I believe when he fell ill, I'm a big fan of Rusty McClure and Jack Heffern's book, American Stonehenge, Coral Castle. The best biography I've ever read on Ed Leedskalnin. And it said that he died of kidney failure. And he felt poorly, and he knew that he was feeling poorly. And I believe that he took time to disassemble his devices. And it all just looks like junk laying around, but somebody else who knew the secret would be able to walk in and hook all these things together and make it work. I believe that he delighted in hiding things in plain sight. That is what he did. And I believe that most of it is still there. I know that people came and took certain little parts and pieces. From what I've heard, the black box is missing from the tripods, and also more than one, because he had several of them. If you look in his pictures, you can see sometimes 2, 3 tripods in a single picture, all of them with the same kind of box on top. Now, these are missing. And there are certain aspects of it that are just simply a mystery that we don't know. And the biggest thing that we are missing, in my opinion, are the concepts that he's left behind. I think we're too busy worrying about the mechanics part of it, when if we would learn the principles and the philosophies behind this new physics, that these things will be incidental. They'll be easy to understand and to figure out, because I don't think there was anything complicated about the process. It was about understanding the physics that were driving the process that was so important. And those are still there.
Space Alien was wondering, could actual biorhythms be a factor in Ed's achievements?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. Can you explain to me what biorhythms are?
All right, Space Alien, could you inform us? Because I'm not...
Don't talk over my head, Space Alien. I'm only a genius on this planet, so you got to dumb it down a little for me.
Right? Well, going back to your whole History Channel experience, I know it was really exciting at one point, but at one point it was just kind of, holy shnikes, what's going on here? And I actually finally got to see it. I was just sitting there one day watching, and I was like, oh, wow, look, it's RL. I've been waiting to see this.
Hey.
So it was super cool to see you on there and educating the world. But what was your experience? Did it kind of quash any of your dreams, or would you do it again?
I would do it again, but not that way. So part of it was not them, and Prometheus Entertainment. They gave me a great opportunity, and I was very happy about it. They had called me up out of the blue. Hi, I'm so and so from Prometheus, and I'm jumping up and down, on the other side of the phone. Now, they don't know this, but I'm giddy as a schoolgirl over here. And they're talking to me, asking me questions, this and that. And I'm like, what is it what are you getting at? And they said, well, we're doing this thing on megalithic structures, and one of them we want to include is the Coral Castle. And this is what they said to me. It was really nice. They said, we've done all exhaustive research, and basically you're the only person to talk to on the subject. And I was like, okay, all right. Wow. That's a pretty big compliment. And the producers were really nice. I had a little bit of a problem. I told them no first. And they were like, okay. And he said, well, can I ask why? And I said, yeah, because I feel like you're not interested in answers, that you're interested in questions. I mean, the name of the show is The Unexplained. Apparently, answers aren't what you do, because this would then be called The Explained, right? And I wanted my discoveries to be given some light and some air, and be allowed to flourish and take root in the minds of some people who have never heard this information, who don't know this about the Coral Castle. And they had assured me that they would try to work some of that in, but that at the end of the day, their job was to create more mystery. And I find this to be the problem with a lot of these shows, is that the information is given in a way that at the end, the viewer or the listener ends up being more confused at the end, with more questions than less. And I'm in the answer business. I'm not in the question business. So we went back and forth for a while, and they said, well, how about you write some questions that you would like us to ask you, and all these things. And so I did that, and I'm like, all right. Gives me a feeling of like, okay, they're invested in this. And I spent some time talking with the producers, who were super nice to me. They were just so nice. And they flew me down to Miami, put me in a great hotel, and just A plus treatment the entire way. They were very excited for me to be there. I had a sinus infection that was so bad it was making my back teeth hurt.
Oh no!
And it's in February. It's in February in Pennsylvania, which is well, they call it summer in London, but nowhere else. It was very cold here and snowy, and so I leave here and I'm sick, and then I go to 86 degrees Miami, Florida, with humidity. And then also, you may not know this, but if you ever have a sinus infection, airplane rides are not fun. They're not fun. It feels like your skull's going to split in half and something's going to crawl out and attack the other passengers. But so I'm just kind of generally miserable while I'm there, just sick, miserable, which is nobody's fault. I'm hopped up on coffee and, take some cold medicine and get the sniffles down and all that kind of stuff. And I get ready. And, all right, my big moment. And they call me, you're needed on the set. And I thought, oh, here we are. My moment has arrived. The limo should be pulling up any minute now. And no, I take a cab. I take a cab and I drive to the Coral Castle, and I get there and there's nobody around. And so finally I got a hold of somebody, and they found the people who were supposed to be filming me. And I'm like, oh, here we go. All right. So we're going to, I've seen the shows. I know. Where's my fireplace? No. See that wooden stool on top of that wooden box over there out in the middle of the Coral Castle right there where the sun's beating down? You sit there. That's where you sit.
Oh, no.
And I thought, okay. No, yeah, right. So it's fine. So I even asked him before I get there, I'm like, look, I'm fully covered with tattoos, and I don't ever see tattooed people on your show. Or tattoos a problem? Oh, no. Tattoos are no problem at all. Well, I found out why. It's because I'm going to wear a long sleeve button down dress shirt with long pants with my sleeves rolled down and keep my hands in my lap. That's why it's not a problem. It's because no one's going to see them. Well, anybody who knows me will tell you, if you tell me I can't talk with my hands, I've become a mute. I am of no help to the human race if I cannot speak with my hands, because that's where I do it. So I'm sitting there trying to answer questions and keep my hands in my lap and sit on this hard stool and lean forward that's on this box. And then I'm sweating, right? And I mean profusely sweating, because at the time I was a little bit of a heavier person. And it's also 86 degrees and I'm sick as a dog. So I'm glistening a bit, you might say. So the producer stops filming. He looks over at some assistant off to the side and says, oh, he needs you to dab him down. And I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. So this very nice girl walks over. She picks up a hand of these rough brown Dunkin' Donuts napkins that they must have just picked up that morning, and proceeds to rake that across my forehead back and forth until the sweat disappears. And I'm just like, I'm not really enjoying my experience right now. And then I was like, oh, you know what, though? It's okay. It's sun. It'll be all right, because it's just the sun. Well, it's not just the sun. For some reason, the sun isn't enough when you do TV. You need the sun, and you need a giant spotlight that's as bright as the sun. And then what you need is someone right next to you, and I mean right next to you on either side. For those of you who have not been on TV, you sit on a stool very still, and then these people come up to you with reflective panels, and they stand, I mean, just an inch away from where the filming is. It's very tight, and they reflect all of the sun and the light and everything back on you. So basically, they were convection cooking their Coral Castle expert as he was giving testimony. And it was just, I ended up walking away with basically I had sun poisoning, sunstroke. I was I was medium well anyway, and then sick on top of it. And then just I didn't feel like I got to say the things that I wanted to say or needed to say for me, but they got what they wanted out of me for the show. And the one thing they did show was they did a really cool little animation, if you notice, of the Perpetual motion holder with the leads coming off of it from the hidden schematic. They did a nice animation of that. And that was it. They really didn't talk about it. They just showed it. And I think they liked me as a narrator, because I feel like that's what I did for most of my part there. I didn't really talk about anything that they showed on there about the Constellation Wall or about, any of the other things, but they liked the way I said my answers. So they seem to have cut around quite a bit, because they asked me, I want to say 22 or 23 questions, and I was on there about a minute, all told. And so then the arduous task of flying back from 86 degree sunny Florida back to 14 degree Pennsylvania, and then back to my real job the next day. So and they said, "Oh, can we have you on the show?" And I was like, "Oh, I'd love to be. When can we do it?" "Well, 2 weeks from now is when we're planning it." And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Thanks for the heads up.
I mean, they were fantastic to me. Yeah, they were fantastic to me, but they were like, you have to be ready when the opportunity arrives. And I did what I could to make it a successful venture for everyone. And I did have a great time. I met wonderful people while I was down there. I got to have a personal tour by Laura May, the curator and general manager of the Coral Castle herself, bought me lunch and took me around the Coral Castle, recorded my interviews, just could not have been more supportive, and very happy to say, just placed an order for 100 of my books
That's
that
awesome.
she would like autographed. Yeah, that she would like autographed and to be sold at the Coral Castle. In fact, that's the only place you can get a signed copy of my book. You can't buy one any
got
other
one
way.
right
The only
here.
way to do it is
I'm
yes,
showing
you do,
everybody
but you're
on
special, Tess.
Periscope. I love it. It's my favorite.
And well, thank you. And you know what? That means a lot to me because you have read the book. When you talk to me and you ask me questions, you know what you're talking about. I can smell the highlighter coming off of those pages, and I appreciate that because the fact that you care is what helps me get more information out. It helps you, when you go to tell other people about it, you know what you're saying. You're one of my representatives. You're out there preaching the magnetic gospel. And that's what I like.
Indeed. And we had discussed before actually doing a giveaway, and Space Alien over here is like, but wait, I want a signed copy. So in our book giveaway on the show this evening, will that copy be autographed as well?
Autographed, dated, signed, sealed, and delivered.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to do the giveaway. I think I'll just put everybody's names that have been in the chat room tonight in a little fishbowl on a bunch of little papers and draw one out and then notify them, and then I can contact you with the address. But I'm super stoked that you had said that. So awesome. I'm excited for whoever wins it because it's a really awesome read, and it's, not a book where you're like, oh God, how long is it going to take me to read this? Like, you could easily read this in a couple hours. It's that interesting, and there's so much different information in here, and I'm just so grateful for what you're doing and continuing on Ed's legacy. I mean, there's a lot of people that, like you said, they just drive by and they don't even look at it. I mean, I would probably get in an accident. I don't know. I'd have to pull over and check it out. I have to go there someday. I lived in Miami and never got to go there, so that's on my bucket list for sure.
You know what would be amazing is for me to give you my tour of the Coral Castle. I would love to do that.
I would love that.
Make a video of it, of me giving you to the best of my understanding of everything he left behind, show you how I found things, where they are, what they mean, and really go in depth into what is entailed in Ed Leedskalnin's greatest achievement. And I admire the fact that you want to go. And that you're like, I haven't been, but man, it's one of those things that has to happen, because I have those things in my life too, not just the Coral Castle, but that has been my main one. And I've been there 4 times now, plan to go back and, until I can't anymore. And every time I go, I learn something new. Someone goes, oh, hey, did you see this before? And I go, no, I haven't. Hold on, give me that. Let me see, and here I am. I'm that same 9-year-old kid in the Castle of Secrets, finding new stuff. And it seems to be almost limitless. But what we arrive at is something very easy to get our heads and our minds around, is that Ed discovered a new kind of physics. And if we will embrace it, it will change the world.
There's so many amazing things that we can do with that knowledge. And I'm hoping someday, we get every piece of the puzzle and we're able to use this to make more megalithic structures. Could you imagine, how long houses could survive? The way they make structures these days is not good. And you have hurricanes in these certain areas. To be able to build these structures in hurricane-laden areas would save so many tax dollars and so on and so forth. And man, just to have the knowledge that Ed did. And I asked you this earlier, do you know the last grade that Ed had completed? I need
it
to
was,
figure
from what I understand from his biography, he had a 4th grade education.
That is so amazing to me.
And I have twice as much education as him. I have a 9th grade education. And so obviously this stuff has come about by a long line of well-educated geniuses such as Ed and myself. But I think actually it is our strength. Because in many ways, and he makes this argument, he says, the books 25 years ago are wrong now. Well, the books you're reading now will be wrong 25 years from now. And if those books were wrong then, and these are wrong now, and those will be wrong in the future, then is this really education? Because to me, it's not. I see it as indoctrination. He says the scientists come by they use indirect and ultra-indirect methods to achieve their theories. And he is right, because everything that he has done, he has proven the hard way, and proving it the hard way seems to dispel all of these unfortunate principles of physics that we now seem to be saddled with and unable to get out of our, not just of our educational system, but out of our culture. That we talk about Newton. He saw an apple fall to the ground and very shrewdly realized that a force was being applied to that apple that was pulling it to the center of the earth. Well, he didn't know that at the center of the earth was a giant iron and nickel magnet, or he may not have called it gravity. And I think he would have referred to it as magnetism. And the secret that Ed quietly left is that the earth is magnetic, but the secret is that it's paramagnetic. In other words, we have 2 magnetic fields on this planet. And you can see the interaction of them whenever you see lightning, or you see clouds that are flat on the bottom, like they're being pressed against an invisible table. It is one paramagnetic field pulling that water vapor against the other paramagnetic field, and you see it flattening it out and squashing it down back into water. And we see it around us all the time, and it is the ability of people like Ed Leedskalnin to see reality, and that's what science is. Science is the observation and interpretation of reality. And Ed Leedskalnin did not have any indoctrination to release or to blind him to the reality he saw around him. When other people would walk by and they would see certain things and ignore them, he would stop and pay attention. And because of that, when you know things that other people don't know, then you can do things that other people can't do. And I think Ed is the shining example of that one particular principle.
And I love this book because you go over so many different things which Ed is trying to portray in his Coral Castle, and just the way your and Ed's mind works is very intriguing to me. So your perspective on seasons and why there are seasons, can you fill in our listeners on that?
Absolutely. One of the other great secrets that Ed Leedskalnin discovered is that we do not rotate around the sun in a flat stereo orbit around the central equator of the star. He says that we slide along axis way. Again, this is another one of those sentences that I ponder on for a week or a month. And I go, what do you mean you slide axis? Oh, we slide axis way. In other words, we rotate at a 23-degree angle to the sun in relation to its equator. If the equator were 0, 0 degrees straight across, we rotate at a 23-degree angle, which means that we go above the hemisphere of the sun to the northern hemisphere, and then we go back down our inclination to our apogee, which is the southernmost exposure we get from the sun. And then as we come back up again and the equators align, this is the equinox. This is when our equator and the sun's equator are aligned for a moment. But we are on the upswing, so we would be getting northern exposure after that. And then this causes magnetic hibernation. You see the trees are not getting, they have enough magnetism to live, but not enough to thrive or flourish. So they magnetically hibernate. And then as we go back around and we start traversing back down to the southern inclination of magnetism from the sun, things start to come back to life again. They bud, they grow, they thrive, they flourish, because we're in the northern hemisphere and we need the southern exposure of the sun. And that only happens during the spring and summer months. And it is this magnetic change, because our magnetism doesn't change. So we have to change the exposure of magnetism we get for there to be a cause of seasons. And this is exactly what Ed Leedskalnin describes. When we put the lens over our eye of magnetism and we start looking, really looking at our world and our universe, you have to start throwing out a lot of the nonsense explanations that we have, because we would rather be told something that's wrong than to say we don't know as a species. And I find that to be one of our greatest challenges, is being able to wait until we have the right answer, and to be able to stop and observe and to really critically think about what we're seeing. Jumping to conclusions is one of the problems with physics today, and why we're not able to do very much in comparison with as much as we think we know. When we talk about Einstein, his theory of relativity is, while profound in some ways and really thought-provoking and exciting, it is also flawed in some ways. And we still accept this model, and then we tack on, and when there's gaps or holes or mistakes, we tack on quantum physics. And we do those intellectual backflips of everything is everywhere all the time. I don't even know what that means. M theory, string theory. They're all just really apologists for the mistakes that we find in relativity. And the reason is because it was based on Newton's flawed work, where he called the force gravity instead of magnetism, which is what it was all along. So you see, once we start the trail wrong, and Newton he meant well and he was brilliant, he just didn't know what was at the core of the earth. But Einstein did, and he still perpetuated Einstein's gravitational or Newton's gravitational theories into his own work, and continued the mistake and then expounded upon it, creating even more confusion. And this is where Leedskalnin sets the record straight, that we live in a world and a universe that is formed, created, governed, and controlled by magnetism. And until we start seeing that, we are lost, and we will just keep coming up with weirder and weirder theories until we finally arrive at the truth. No, that is the entrance sign, and the entrance sign is carved out of coral and has a 5-pointed star on top. And it says entrance admission 10 cents, and it says drop below. And this is actually how I found out about the whole constellation wall. But to the red door, what he shows is actually the same planet. It's the Earth, it's sun in the middle, and it shows the Earth, and it says 21, number 21 down by it. And then it shows the Earth on at an opposite angle on the apogee and the height of its orbit. And so what he does is he shows that at the solstice, June 21st, and then at the winter solstice, December 21st, these are the apex and apogee of Earth's orbit at an angle to the sun, sliding axis way. when you look at the Polaris telescope, which is not really a telescope, it's a sextant. A sextant tells the position of a star in the sky, and that's what the crosshairs do in the Polaris telescope. You can see the star Polaris in one of the quadrants of the crosshairs every clear night of the year. Every quadrant is a season. As it moves from one quadrant in the crosshairs to the next, it is also a change of season. And it coincides with the dates that he shows on the red door. You can time it perfectly.
Skywatcher in our chat room was wondering if there's any way to see the proof on Ed's perspective on why seasons happen, and so on and so forth. Is it provable, or is it just basically a theory that he has?
I think that there are ways to prove it. I think that they need to be done in a laboratory. I do think that there are experiments that can be done. I think there are observations that can be done. But they have to be done through the lens of looking at things as magnetic. You know, we don't need sunlight to grow plants. We can grow them in a dark room with nothing more than magnetism. This has been done. It is magnetism that causes life to cease or begin, that causes it to flourish or to hibernate. And what we witness when we see the seasons are the reactions to magnetic changes in our environment. Why do birds head south? Why do trees hibernate? Why do these things happen? It's because the magnetic field is being changed. The magnetic exposure is being changed. And these creatures and animals and species and plants, they have to find a suitable way to deal with the changed environment. Even though it's temporary, it's something that they have to do. And so birds will fly south. The trees will hibernate and shed their leaves, and they will go down to minimum capacity and then hold that until the excess magnetism that they need to flourish comes back again. I think if you want to say it's temperature driven, I think that's ridiculous, because you can have green trees in the middle of white snow. It has nothing to do with it. It's not temperature based. The temperature has to do with the distance we are away from the sun, but it's just coincidental with the type of exposure we receive. If we were just as close in the wintertime as we are in the summer, we would have warm days and trees with no leaves on them. It would just be the way it is, because it has to do with the magnetic exposure, not the temperature that we live at. So while, yes, I suppose there are ways to prove this. I don't know a specific experiment that can be done, but I think that would be a great thing to do if someone would attack that question from that perspective and use these principles of, if you look at this is a north and south magnet and this is a north and south magnet, and then you change the rotation of it to a 23-degree angle, and then you change the distance at this point and change it here. What are the things that happen? And if you could expose biological plant life to that kind of environment and then observe the results of that, I think that it would be interesting. But I think we see it all around us every day anyway. I mean, we are the experiment. We can just simply observe it and try to measure magnetism and types of it in the plant material itself while the phenomenon is happening. Check it midsummer at the solstice, and then again later, and see what the differences are in magnetic exposure in plant activity. I think there's a lot of room there for just that one thing to create a lot of experiments.
For sure, and Space Alien was saying seasons seem to be slipping. He says if you speak to a farmer, they can tell you seasons are no longer a thing we can predict. So, yep, we are changing in a more permanent way. I don't even know if you can use a farmer's almanac anymore. It seems like our seasons are whack. Has there been a change that you know of in our magnetic field? Any shifts that could be causing this change?
What we seem to be noticing is that, and I had somebody bring this up to me before, is that the seasons are still there, but they seem like they're happening later for us. In other words, you'll still have spring, but it will show up. It will show up about a month or two later than what we normally anticipate it to. Same length of seasons, but the seasons the timing of them seem to be off, and it's because we are, for all intents and purposes, and I hate to say this, even though I'm an entropy fan, is things are slowing down. And we can read this by the fact that the moon is receding from our planet about 2 inches a year. It's not much, but it just shows you that we're losing our grip just a little bit. Our planet did not always start out having a 24-hour day. It was a faster day. Our planet is slowing down over time. If the orbit is slowing down, if the spin is slowing down, then our movement around the sun may be slowing down too, which may mean that there is a change in the way our seasons happen and the lengths of them, the timing of them. So we are not in a fixed vacuum system. All these things change. You know, people talk about climate change. Climate change has been happening on this planet and will always happen on this planet, whether we're here or not. Climates change. That's what they do. And they change in relation to the environment that they're in. When we have a sun who is pushing all this magnetic energy toward us, and we're a magnet who's pushing this magnetic energy back, and there's going to be some interaction. There's going to be some linking there. And this is going to cause some drag in the system. And even though it may take a long time, over thousands, millions of years, it will change things. And we have to be ready for that change. We have to understand that these changes happen and not be caught so by surprise when things are off by a minute or a day or a week or a month, because the universe doesn't operate on a second clock like we do. It operates on a whole other level of time over thousands and millions and billions of years. And, we worry about, summer's a couple weeks late. I think that's a very forgivable deficit in the system, especially one that is so fluid and apt to change as our magnetic system is.
Well, on that note, we do have to go to our second musical break. So you guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this.
When you smile, I see the life in your eyes. I hear the rhythm of you, creating moments we chill to. Wrapped in the waves of emotion, it's imperative. We're making love to your mind. It's not the feel of your thighs on my back when I'm deep in consummation with you in the room. It's not the scent of your breath in my face when we touch and share the rhythm of a loving embrace. It's your smile that lets me know I'm on point, that I have written the word in this joint, and it's you. Pretty brown eyes and confidence, you're my ministry, and girl, I'm feeling it. Come on, so smile for me, and don't let my hand go, girl. I just want you to know when I'm sending my love to you in verse 2 with a kiss and a beat that you and I can step to. Come on, God created the heavens and the earth. What he said is very best for the day of your birth. No longer is it just me, myself, and I. But since you have arrived, you're the apple of my eye, girl. Open your heart and let me come inside. All this love is forever for the ride. And when that DJ played our favorite song, we dance the night away until we're heading home, where we're holding you.
I got dreams and ambition, I'm ready and I'm willing, I'm meeting this competition. You don't wanna be my dinner. The whole shift changed when the music bang. Love the look on their face. I got dreams and ambition, I'm ready and willing, I'm meeting this competition. You don't wanna be my dinner. The whole shift changed when the music bang. I just love to see the look on their face, and if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I got dreams and ambition, man. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I'm ready and willing, even if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I'm meeting this competition. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. You don't wanna be my dinner. I'm about to do this to death, cause I know they watching. Don't understand the talking, tell that dog to quit barking. I'm an entrepreneur, so correct when you talking. Bet I get it back and take a loss to be a boss. Coming fast and I'm switching lanes with it, crisscross. Never messing with you, rapping ratchets, what you really thought. And my jab steady dreaming, chasing missions for the fam. Understand I'm flowing lands from the Milwaukee brand. Thought you knew you can't wear my shoes, not do what I do. It's a mob, I don't pick and choose, just sticking to the rules. Keep my beast above and beneath. They know I'm beauty. What you need, I got what you need when it come to it. Who been grinding all winter so the summer extra lit? I've been in and out the booth trying to weigh up my greatness. It ain't no time to play with it, and if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I got dreams and ambition, man. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I'm ready and willing, even if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I'm eating this competition. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. You don't wanna be my dinner.
With great precision, I'm on a mission. Lots of ambition, my transition. The time was ticking, willing and wishing. Just listen, I punch harder than Sonny Liston. They fishing, looking for teeth. It look like Lipton. They tripping. I am the king, whose competition? Collisions. Conclusion is I'm in a position, lifted, transcending beyond that comprehension. Time to hang it up, swaggerific, the lynchman. You know how this goes. Just follow the street codes. We make it look easy, like we putting in cheat codes. Beauty and the beast is in beast mode. Haters on the sidelines, I tell them to keep score. I go crazy on the beat, tell Spaz to keep it low. You know Mystique, close with a toaster, you won't toast.
And if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I got dreams and ambition, man. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I'm ready and willing, even if I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. I'm meeting this competition. If I slip, I'ma bounce right back, cause I was born for this. You don't wanna be my dinner.
Your love empowers me. It gives me the energy to move beyond my capabilities. There is no limit to what your love can do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hey guys, welcome back and thanks so much for hanging out with us this evening. I'm here with RL Poole and we're discussing the Coral Castle, Ed Leedskalnin, and this amazing megalithic structure that he has built. And this is like the most recent megalithic structure, right, RL? Besides that, you just have, the pyramids and such, not just, but the pyramids and Stonehenge, so on and so forth. This is the most recent in history that has been built.
Right. It is the only modern megalithic structure that's ever been built. And it was built by a guy who lived in America and spoke English. I mean, it is the most important megalithic structure that's ever been built, in my opinion. I mean, even though that the pyramids, are massively impressive and technologically superior. We have Puma Punku, which is just inexplicable at every level. It is inaccessible to us, really. I mean, that's really what it boils down to, is these structures, as wondrous as they are inaccessible because of cultural or time or language barriers, whatever limitations that are placed on us. They are lost on us, but not the Coral Castle. The man built it in America, speaks English, wrote things down, and then what I figured out was that he's leaving the secrets behind in a series of riddles and clues. Why there are not people just crawling all over the Coral Castle right now after realizing some of these enormous discoveries is beyond me. It's almost as if people don't want to know.
Some say ignorance is bliss, but I'm excited about the prospect of educating myself, and if I lived near there, I'd definitely be, like you said, crawling all over it. Going back to the sign that says 10 cents, drop below, there's also a carving. Is it pronounced spica?
Yeah,
what exactly does that mean?
Okay, so the third time I went to the Coral Castle, I go at about 9 o'clock in the morning, and in the oblique lighting of the early morning sun, I'm looking at the entrance sign, and I'm putting in my silver 10-cent Roosevelt dime and paying homage to Ed. I look at the entrance sign, and I can see that looks like a word that's been hand-scrawled in the coral underneath where you make the little 10-cent donation. And it said a word, and it was a word I didn't know. It's just S-P-I-C-A, spica. And I'm like, spica, that's familiar to me, but I don't know exactly what it is. And I looked it up, and spica is the brightest star in the constellation of Virgo. Again, lost on me. And when I walk in and I see the east wall of the Coral Castle, I realize, people say that's the Mars statue. And I walk over to the Mars statue, and what I see is that it has spica written on it too. And I'm like, the entrance sign now makes sense, because how they teach you to look for spica in the night sky, the old timers method was you would drop below the arc of you would follow the arc of Arcturus, drop below Polaris, and you will arrive at spica. Drop below. There's a big clue there. Say drop below, and then when you look below that, it says spica. And he's leaving this breadcrumb trail of clues. And then when I go back and I see, spica's written on that statue too. Now I'm like, if that's spica, well then, there's Saturn in retrograde, and then here's the crescent of Virgo. And the first three statues on the east wall of the Coral Castle, going from left to right, is Virgo. And I said, that's a constellation. And then the next one's, it's a constellation, and the next one's a constellation. And I go from spica all the way down to Taurus, and I can line them all up, and they all fit perfectly together. And Ed drew this. He carved this out of stone, a star map. And then it's such an accurate star map that I can tell you, the only purpose of a star map really is to count time, because we don't have the capability of geospatial positioning in the universe. So the only real reason to have a celestial marker or a celestial map is to mark time. And it marks September 10th, 1923, the year he built the castle. And so he's leaving these clues purposely behind, and they're very complex. And they are all speaking to the same thing of he is using the natural and fundamental forces that are around us, but are unrecognized and therefore go untapped, that he was able to tap into, to access, and then use to do things that we cannot, in order to prove to us that these principles are real and valid and should be studied.
Ed has left like so many clues all around the Coral Castle and different carvings, and if you didn't really think about it, you just think, wow, that's really pretty, interesting, cool. One of the features is a 6-pointed star that represents galaxies and the celestial alignments, which Ed built into the Coral Castle. And it says that here we see the representation of galaxy M104, or the Sombrero Galaxy, and its appearance, how it is similar to the galaxy below, and that the center of the fountain has a 6-point star. What exactly is that? Is that another way of posting some sort of time, or what's the importance of that?
It's a code. And thank you for bringing this up, because I think this is another thing people who buy the book will really enjoy, is that Ed came up with a code system. And the code system, I have a very strong feeling, came from the back of a $1 bill. If you look at the back of a $1 bill, you'll see the seal, the Great Seal of the United States. And on one of them is a 6-pointed star. And this 6-pointed star is comprised of a conglomeration of 5-pointed stars. And this is when it hit me. Oh, 5-pointed stars are just stars, like Spica. 6-pointed stars mean galaxies. Yeah, a whole bunch of 5-pointed stars and a 6-pointed star. That makes sense to me. A whole bunch of stars agglomerated together in an organized group is a galaxy. And this is the code he left behind. And if you follow the celestial alignments, you go, oh, there's a 6-pointed star there. And that's exactly where M104, the Sombrero Galaxy, would be. And then if you look over on the east wall of the Coral Castle, you'll see another 6-pointed star that's been carved into the wall. And it is exactly where Cancer is and where M44, or the Beehive Galaxy, would be. And these are, again, he's using galaxies, he's using constellations, he's using stars and planets and the Earth and the moon, and he's using every type of celestial object to figure into this 16-point celestial alignment that he wants to be recognized. And when you start to understand the code, then you can break open these secrets and you start making sense of them, and the light comes on and you go, oh, I see what you're doing now. Oh, this isn't the moon fountain. This is the Sombrero Galaxy. It even looks like the Sombrero Galaxy. And then it has a 6-pointed star in the middle, which means it's a galaxy. And then right where another galaxy would be is another 6-pointed star. And they tried to say, oh, this is a Latvian star. First of all, there's no such thing as the Latvian star. And if there were, it wouldn't be 6-pointed, it would be 5. And so this is the type of folklore that gets written over the actual facts. When people don't know the answer to something, they'd rather just make up the answer than actually wait for the right answer to show up. And this is kind of the battle I'm fighting, and why I'm glad you brought it up is because too much folklore has been said about some of these things when they really break down to even more exciting facts. The truth is way more exciting than the folklore.
It certainly is, and there's so many different constellations that he's got going on there. And then there's even a star map key, basically.
So, yes, very good. So no map is any good without a key, right? And so he leaves the key for us, and the key is on the north wall of the castle. It's like every map has a legend or a key, so that way you know how to read it properly. His is the Coma Berenices, which is a constellation which lies just above Virgo in its natural orientation. So what we see, what they call it the crown on the 30-ton wall, but it's not the crown. It's an exact, and I mean exact, representation of the Coma Berenices, which is a constellation. And when you see the Coma Berenices on the north wall, it is pointing straight up and facing north. Well, when you have the Coma Berenices both pointing up and facing north, you will see the constellations on the east wall exactly as I've laid them out, and the way that Ed laid them out is you see Virgo, and you see the constellation or the galaxies in Leo in the hindquarters of its usual interpretation, and then you see Cancer, and you see Gemini, and you see Taurus, and you see them all in this orientation, and it's almost like the base of the wall is the celestial equator that they rest on. But the key is when you see the Coma Berenices pointing straight up like a north arrow, and you look below, you will see these constellations in a line below it exactly right. So he's teaching you how to read the map by using a north arrow, which is the Coma Berenices, and he even puts it on the north wall. I mean, it's brilliant in its simplicity, and the fact that it's been in our face the whole time. Isn't that something?
Right in front of your face. Had it been a snake, it might have bit you.
It would have definitely bit us.
And someone was saying he must have really been into astronomy. Jim said that in the chat room. Do you think he was really into astronomy, or this went along with what he had learned from the Egyptians and such?
Well, look at the Egyptians. Look at the Mayans. What were they obsessed with? The stars and moving really big, heavy rocks. Neither one of those seem to figure into survival, do they? I mean, when you think about it, people are like, well, they planted crops by the stars. Did they? Because we don't do that now. You can look at the Farmer's Almanac all you want to, but you plant when it's warm and you harvest when it's cold. And that's what they went by, was the temperature, the climate around them. They didn't go by the stars. They might go, oh, I see, Orion's belt, and I know it's getting close to springtime, but nobody was planting by the minute from the stars. Studying the stars with the intent that they did means that there was some extremely valuable purpose that was pulling their attention away from making clothing or raising crops or from building another kind of structure that were easier to build. Why didn't these people live in huts? Why were they building giant megalithic structures and studying the stars? Well, it seems, according to Leedskalnin and his efforts, that they were related to one another. And he was a brilliant astronomer. He was actually able to figure out the correct way the Earth revolves around the sun. And he was able to understand the reason for seasons. And he had star charts on his wall. They had I even made one myself of a dial where you can you can cut out the back of a cereal box and make one of these. Their instructions are online, and you can make one, and you can see what star alignments are going to happen in the near future for major constellations and things like that. And he, I believe, used them to calculate and compute the celestial alignments that he was looking for that would facilitate him building the Coral Castle.
In your book, you also talk about I believe it's pronounced Antikythera device.
The Antikythera device. That's really good, Tess.
Yay, I did it!
Looking at no, you nailed it. The Antikythera device. This was a device that was found off of the coast of Greece, off of a little island called Antikythera, by sponge divers around turn of the century in 1900. They brought it up, and it was this box that was completely corroded and, coral on it and things like that. Well, they end up cleaning this up, and they realized that it is a set of gears that are so complicated and so precise and so well done that it is more finely built and more accurate than a modern Swiss watch. That is amazing. And it was the first computer, I guess you could really say. It was the first computer, and it was run by gears. And what did it do? It predicted celestial alignments. They said that it would tell you it was for your horoscope, because it would land on a certain sign. But these signs were driven by the constellations, by the stars. And if you look at the Antikythera device and you imagine that the center of the dial would be the Earth, and then the outside would be its relative position to the sun, and then the other hand would be its relative position to the moon, what you really have is a star map calculator that is made with such fine gears that it is exact and precise. Why would that be important to these guys? Why would they care about the stars or the planets at all? Well, I believe what they found out was that this mundane bit of knowledge is what facilitated the impossible, and that someone had figured out this system and designed a computer to be able to figure this out and work in real time, so that when you were in the right place, you would know when it was the right time to do this kind of work. That's my theory for the Antikythera device, and I believe that it is more valid than predicting your horoscope, reading your future, or any of those things. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think that the level of effort and skill and expense, this had to be very expensive to make this time. And the quality that it was made with seems to say that its purpose was more profound than that.
Do they know what metals it's made of?
It was made of copper and of brass, and that the wheels, the gear wheels, were so tightly and perfectly fitted that it was basically flawless as a computational computer. Now, what mind would think of that? And why would they go to the trouble and expense of making one? It had to be very valuable. And I believe that it was very valuable because if you knew the secret of what the machine was used for, then it is priceless. And so any effort and any expense is worth it when you know what you can do just by using it.
There's so many amazing discoveries that have been uncovered, and this is one of them. Another one that blows my mind is a tool that looks like it would be used today, found in stone from millions of years ago, and it makes you rethink, were we really here way back then, before, scientists and such say we were? I think anything's possible. I think it is possible, and it's hard to really... Science is really cool. I really love it. It was one of my favorite classes, but there's so many things that we're still trying to figure out, and I don't know, the school system really perplexes me, the way that they teach you different things that aren't actually true. And a lot of our history...
Yeah, we live in a world where consensus is more important than truth.
Right.
Where culture is more important than facts. And when we do that, we have lost. We have lost. And Leedskalnin beckons to us to come back to the world of truth and reality and observation. And I have to say it, simplicity. When you realize that we live in a magnetic universe, that everything we do is magnetically based and influenced, then you would have to start revisiting some of these sacred cows, some of these old theories, some of these, I hate to say it, but kind of trash, nonsense thoughts that are being pervasively intruded into our culture and into the minds of people who will become the future leaders and scientists of tomorrow. And what we have to do is revisit a time of simplicity. We have to revisit a time of facts and proof and evidence and the boot camp of the mind that is necessary in order to arrive at the truth we need to advance as a species. And we advance by looking at our past, not by looking at our future and making up future theories about things that we still don't know, but by looking at the past and the people who were able to do more than we can by knowing something we don't know. And I believe that this was Leedskalnin's calling, and I believe that it's mine, that I'm shouting into the darkness and into the wilderness that there is civilization here, that there is a secret form of physics that we have yet to discover in a widespread way, but that Leedskalnin was able to profoundly not just discover, but use and then explain and then leave behind the pieces for us. He is one of the most beneficent people who have ever lived, profoundly beneficent to us, and asked nothing in return. And all he asked for was an ear to listen, and it seems as though he's only just now being heard. Much like Tesla.
He's like my major hero. He's my favorite. I actually have a picture of him in my studio here. But
I love Nikola Tesla and Ed Leedskalnin. They are passengers on the same train, going to the world of truth, of reality, of real science, real discovery. And you were talking earlier about the application of this magnetic theory, that we could build stronger housing and things like that. But I have to tell you, as great as that idea is, it is scratching the surface of the potential applications of using this magnetic theory. We see, if you look at, for instance, the Bermuda Triangle, planes will go down, ships will sink, things are happening that we don't explain. But they're happening to metal objects with a magneto wheel rotating at high speed and generating current flying through the atmosphere, going through our ocean. And it is at the exact point where Leedskalnin was doing his magnetic work and where he was manipulating the magnetic field of his environment to create effects that are a lot like this. And I think that if we started looking through this lens, we would explain a lot of our mysteries. We were talking a little bit offline about your trip to go investigating and looking at anomalous reports. And even those, I wonder, could they be magnetically based things? Still real, but not quite what we think they are. I've noticed that when we look at these, when you see people who are ghost hunters, things like that, well, they do. They check the magnetic field around where they are. That's interesting, isn't it? Why would the magnetic field fluctuate? Why would that even be a thing? Who would even know to check that? And why would it be important? And it's because everything is magnetically based. But we only reserve it for certain things like that, where we go, well, we have no other way to really measure. Let's measure magnetism. And oh, wouldn't you know it? There's something that happens there. There's something that changes, fluctuates, it spikes, it rests. It shows itself to us in an invisible way.
it's very amazing. And, then there's the Leedskalnin effect. Can you tell our listeners what exactly the Leedskalnin effect is?
What I call the Leedskalnin effect was his ability to manipulate the properties of this stone, and to be able to do it at the level of magnitude that he can. If I worked my whole life and I was able to get a 1 cubic meter stone out of the ground using his method, I would consider that an absolute victory. The fact that he was able to cut, lift, move, and set into place a stone that weighs 60,000 pounds, a man that weighs 100 pounds, using no machines, cut, lifted, moved, and set into place with frightening accuracy a 30-ton stone. That is the Leedskalnin effect. That is Ed Leedskalnin maximizing the use of every natural resource around him and no artificial components that are unnecessary. Nothing that runs on fuel, nothing that's a machine. He is simply manipulating the fields around him, just like Nikola Tesla did when he created, alternating current. He was simply taking what was already there and focusing it. And where Tesla used a wire, Leedskalnin used stone. But I believe we are talking about two mega geniuses who are manipulating the exact same thing, magnetism. And one made electricity, and one made the only modern megalithic structure ever built by a man.
They're both very genius individuals. And I wish I had a time machine to go back and sit and talk to these people, or even observe them if they're too busy in thought, in theory, and in action to speak with me. But just to watch them and see how they work, and the things that we could do, the places we could be right now, had, Tesla's works not been stolen from him after he passed. Like, there were so many crates, and then a lot of them went missing, and there was only like 3 or 4 left. Where did those go, and why does the government want to keep that from us? It's like, it's propelling us into ending ourselves the way we're polluting and using up all of the assets of the world when we really don't have to, We have free energy.
It's a scary proposition, though, isn't it? It's scary to think about a huge change. And, we are socially engineered creatures. I mean, I was having this conversation with someone the other day that the people who pay the taxes and fund this organization that we call the United States government, they have to keep control of us. They can't let us run wild. They can't have us be... They have to have us feel free without being free. We have to be controlled because we are a resource. Okay? And so, therefore, we can't have more than what they feel we can handle. We can't progress too quickly. Also, I've heard this theory, and I used to think it was a bunch of nonsense, but now I'm like, could be, was Tesla being murdered. Even though he was a very, very old man when he died, I believe that there is a potential that it could have been purposeful. And the reason that it would be good intentions for national security. Nikola Tesla is the greatest mind that we have ever encountered in modern times. And he had boxes full of theories and ideas and information and weapons and just absolute mind-blowing stuff. Now, this guy lived by himself in an apartment, and if something were to happen to him and the government didn't know about it, and then all of this information fell into the wrong hands, then that could be very dangerous to us in our country. So if you were to let Nikola Tesla live an extremely long life, but then when you see things are getting close to the end, you control the end and then remove the material, and then now we have it and nobody else does. I think that makes a lot of sense. It is a very cold way to do things, and I understand that. But from a certain perspective, I do see how it could have been a thing with good intentions behind it, for safety, for national security, for the protection and the investment of that knowledge. But it doesn't get shared, does it? It gets taken and then we never see it again. And that's the problem. That's what I have a real problem with, is that if you take the information, then it should be used for us and with us. Yeah. And I think that's where we were robbed of Tesla's genius, and that it is sitting in boxes somewhere with lesser men going through it trying to understand. And I do say men because I don't think women are involved in this.
All right. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Because women would already be using it for stuff. They'd be like, you know what? We should do this with it. But they don't. They keep it locked in boxes somewhere. And that genius will not come out for a long time. It will be controlled and disseminated, and it will be given to us in bite-sized pieces as it is seen fit. And that's unfortunate, but that is the way of the world. That's why it's important to listen to me, because I'm one of the only free people in the world. I wrote a book about this. It's true. Go test it, try it, listen, think about it, try it on, And that's what I ask people. You don't have to believe me, but I do ask that people consider. You may accept or reject, but the considering is is the battle I try to win. I just want people to consider these ideas, and I only ask them to consider it because it's a proven fact that Ed Leedskalnin was able to do something we can't, and that it's important enough that we should try to understand how, especially when he went to all the trouble to leave it behind for us. Now, we weren't so lucky with Tesla because there are files and boxes, and we have some patents and stuff, but what we really don't see is where he was going in the future. And with Leedskalnin, I believe that this work is the future, and it's there for the taking.
We actually have a area right outside of Rico, Colorado, where there is a Tesla power station. And this power station powers, I wouldn't call it a town, but it's like a little subdivision. They're very private, unpaved roads, and the roads are insane. It's in this mountainous area. But these guys are able to live off of this free energy. And, you know, a lot of this, I think, that's going on, and one of the reasons why Ed may have buried, and I'd like to go on some sort of hunt to see if we could locate those via dowsing rods or whatever else. Satellites these days are finding all kinds of things, but that their works are still around, and so that's why I'm glad that you're doing the work that you do to try to bring this education back to us as far as what this is, how to use it, and that it is possible to thrive and survive without all of these mechanical and other things. Like, there's so many energies and so many different variables out there. It's just cool that you're tapping into that and trying to basically carry on that legacy, even though if, you know, that may not have been your intent in the first place. It just really struck a chord with you as far as your interest, and you want to know the answers to these questions. But I just, you know, so much kudos to you for doing this and putting so much time and energy and work into this. I know it probably consumes you a lot, but yeah, I went poking around in this Tesla neighborhood, and some people were actually coming out and looking at me like, we don't recognize this person. Who is that? And somebody started following us at one point, but it's still around. And I don't know if a lot of people are privy to it. If the government knows about it, I'm sure they do, but they keep their stuff quiet and to themselves and are able to use this energy. I just find it really intriguing. And I look in this building trying to see what exactly is powering this environment, and I can't find anything that makes sense to me. There's a couple concrete kind of boxes on the floor in the back of the building. Otherwise, it's just empty. But I wonder what's in there and what exactly is powering this area. It'd be so awesome if we had this, but I wonder if there are different effects having free energy, you know, flowing through the air, or however it works. You know, do people get cancer from that, or are there other effects and that's why they're not sharing it, or they just want us to be dependent on them and paying them the almighty dollar?
Well, I think that it's obvious that the energy that we need to power everything is around us. It's flowing through us right now. What we lack is a way to receive it properly and put it to work, because electricity is made from magnetism. Well, we are awash in magnetism. We just need a way to receive that magnetism in a way that creates electricity and then powers something. I see the future as there are no batteries or cords. There's just a chip, a microwave electricity receiver that you just pop a little chip into every electronic device you own, and you hit the button and blink, it just turns on, because the magnetism that's already flowing through the planet and you and me and everything else will just power it naturally as it flows through it. That's the most efficient way to use this. And I think this is what these Tesla towers were doing, was they were taking the magnetism that already existed and amplifying that over a small distance. And then that would be received by something on the other end wirelessly, and it would just simply light up and come into being. I think that this is the big invisible secret that we walk around in every day. We drive cars that run on electricity that's made by coal. We don't need coal to make electricity. We need magnetism, and we are owned by it. We are rich with it. We are inundated with magnetism, and we can take an unlimited amount of magnetism and turn that into an unlimited amount of electricity for our own personal use. It costs us nothing. It's already here. You're soaking in it. You know, like the old Palmolive commercial. You're soaking in it. And we don't see it. We don't smell it. We don't taste it. We can't touch it. we see it all around us, but we don't recognize it. We know what it is, but we can't quite capture it, and that's the trick.
Well, and a lot of it is because we have been dumbed down and so many things have been taken from us that we should be privy to, but we're not. So we only know what we know, you know? How many more times can I say?
Right, if it's not
no?
posted on Facebook, it's not worth hearing. I
Right?
agree with you. If I could somehow put all this information in meme form or in a cool Vine, then yeah, I think I have a future in the Leedskalnin business. But when it comes to actual reading and study and testing and all those things, you're right. Culturally, we can't be bothered. You know, we used to work out math longhand. Now I've got a calculator. You know, I have a laptop in my back pocket. I Google everything. Google tells us what to do and what to know and what to believe, and that's the way it is. We're being socially engineered toward a hive mind of disinformation. Is kind of how it feels to me. Is that we all go to one resource of poorly fed information that we now consider to be the Holy Grail. And we don't trust our brains anymore. We don't use our critical thinking. We don't just stop and look. And it's because we're too busy looking down at our phones to look up at our world.
Do you ever have people come to your, I don't know if to call it speeches or whatnot, and they're surprised at the fact that you are quite a large man with all these tattoos? Like, to me, it's very intriguing and interesting because people have a certain perspective of how knowledgeable people should look and whatnot, but I love how you're so different from everyone else, and you do have the tattoos, and you're so laid back, and like I told you before, I love your sense of humor. Like, there's so many times you've cracked me up, and I'm just like, man, laughter is the best medicine. So I'm especially fond of you, but yeah, do you ever have people be like, wow, I never expected you to look this way. I thought you were going to look different, or do they know what to expect when they come to your lectures?
Oh, no, I hear it a lot that people are like, oh, you're not what I expected at all, because I look like a biker and I talk like a scholar, and that throws people off. You know, they go, oh, you look like you would beat me up, but you're actually like a nerd and you like comic books and you talk about science stuff, and you're not like that at all. And my image does give off I'm complicated. You know, I'm not just one thing. It seems like people who are in the scientific community or in this kind of community, they're like, oh, you have to be vanilla and tame, and you have to be, you know, soft-spoken, and you have to be, you know, and I'm none of those things. I'm outspoken, and I'm direct, and I'm blunt, and I'm tattooed, and I wear what I want to wear, and I do what I want to do with my life, and I'm a free person. And the fact that I live as a free person is what allows me to have my mind be free enough to have these thoughts, to entertain theories that are outside the norm. You have to be willing to be an outcast, to change things. If you're not willing to be an outcast, then don't ever try to change the world or anything around you. If your only goal is to blend in, well, then that's all you'll do.
Yeah, and I love how outside the box you are, and how your mind works, and I hope you keep working towards this. Do you have any goals to build your own Ed Leedskalnin tripod and try doing this for yourself? I know it does take a lot of money. Have you tried any sort of venture where you could put it out there and people can donate to the cause? Because so many people out there are very interested in it and want you to reach that goal of, hey, this is it, and I got it to work. There's GoFundMe, but they do take a portion. There's another one, I can't remember the name of it right now, but they let you have all the proceeds.
Kickstarter, there's GoFundMe, yeah, all that stuff. And, you know, here's what I say. If people want to support me, and I don't want charity, and I don't want donations. You know what I'd love is if people would just go to Amazon and buy my book. That is the best support that you can do, because you're not just, you know, putting a buck or two in my pocket, but you're also being another source of truth and information, because I don't want you to hand me money and take my word for it that I'm a good guy and I'm going to do something great. No. Check my resume, look at the book, read what it says, you know, do the mental work of thinking about the theories and do these things make sense? And does this seem worthwhile? And what has this guy found? And who is Ed? And what was he after? And what was his goal? And if they think that their goals and my goals align, then buy my book, ask someone else to buy it, and read the book and understand it. And support me intellectually. Support me intellectually, then emotionally, and then, physically, financially, whatever after that. But first, see if you believe me and you understand me. And if you believe and understand me, then supporting me will be the easiest thing in the whole world. I won't have to ask. People just will. That's my belief.
If you build it, they will come.
That's right. And I do have plans because I have the parts that Ed Leedskalnin had for his generator wheel. I've already built the Perpetual motion holder. Get me 3 2x4s and some 5-ton chain and the right celestial alignment, and we could do some things. But honestly, with proper funding, I could probably have this cracked in a year. I'm that close. It's just a matter of time and funds and resources. But the work is here. The work is done. The principles are sound. It's just a matter of implementing them, and that can be the slow, arduous, expensive, frustrating task of it. But it will be the most rewarding when it's done. And I couldn't do it without you, Tessa, and people like you who want to give me a voice. People like Prometheus, the History Channel, yourself, Boca Raton Magazine, like all these people just are just like, hey, you know what you're saying, I want other people to hear it. And the fact that you asked me back, the fact that you're so generous and kind to me and you're so well studied on my subject, it's just, I have so much respect for that and a lot of gratitude. And I just wanted you to know that. And I want your listeners to know that too.
Oh, thanks. And I'm so excited to someday meet you in Miami and take the grand tour, because I don't think anybody knows the Coral Castle like you do. So I'm super excited for the day when I can afford to do that. But I can't wait to meet you.
This is on the bucket list.
Indeed, it is for sure on my bucket list. And I can't wait for that day. I'm going to picture it as being in the near future. And as I picture it, it shall be so.
So mote it be. I agree with you.
So we are at the end of our time. Unfortunately, it just seems like there's not enough time in the world for me when it comes to picking your brain. And there's so many other questions that I had for you, but I love how in-depth you go with it. And where can our listeners watch you on YouTube and find your books, so on and so forth?
Okay, so if they want to buy the book, go to Amazon.com, just type in RL Poole or the Leedskalnin Codex, Breakthroughs in Understanding the Coral Castle. Just the Leedskalnin Codex is enough, it'll pop up. But right now I'm in the middle of revamping my YouTube channel, and I want to come out with a channel that I've never announced before, but I came up with the name of Coral Castle TV. And I'm going to be reshooting my old videos, the same information, but I'm going to be updating the format just a bit, making things a little tighter, a little more efficient, and improving over some of the explanations that I've given before, but with the same information, because I feel it's valid. And I want to be kicking off Coral Castle TV within the next month or so on YouTube. And I would appreciate maybe a little shout out from TNT over there when that happens, because I know that you're going to be interested and you'll be an avid watcher as well. But right now I don't have any other outlets or sources. I am available for lectures and talks, of course, different like Ancient Aliens, conferences, and all those things. But really, I would just really be excited if people read the book. It's 77 pages. It's easy to read. You can finish it in 2 hours, and you'll spend the next 10 years scratching your head over it. But you will understand what I'm saying. And once people understand, then that's where change happens. And that's what I really want.
Change is very important, and especially when it's in a positive direction. But I just want to thank you again so much for coming on to my show, and I sometimes say being my victim. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge and everything you've studied. And I commend you so much for what you do and looking into this when a lot of other people don't, and educating us on it. It's so mind-blowing, and I'm so grateful for you and what you've done. But thank you again for being on Late Night in the Rockies with me and hanging out and educating myself and our listeners.
It's been an honor to speak with you again, and anything for you, Tess. Anytime you'd like me back, I want to be here.
No worries. And I look forward to having you back again sometime in the future and having the tour of the Coral Castle. I can't wait.
That's a promise I'll keep.
All right. I'm going to hold you to it. And thank you to all of our listeners on We Are Paradox Media, Facebook, Spreaker, Twitter, Periscope, iHeartRadio, and wherever else you may be listening in the Omniverse tonight. I had a wonderful time this evening, and I can't wait to do it again next weekend. I'm hoping to go live from New Orleans on Spreaker.com. We Are Paradox Media. Don't forget, you guys, we are all in this together. Together, we can make the world a little better. And together, my friends, we are Paradox Media. And without you, there is no us. Until next time, nighty night, love and light. Have a wonderful week. Don't work too hard, and I will see you back here, same time, same place. Feel free to join us on our Skype after party, 1-970-335-9596, or look me up, Tessa Thomas-Peterson. Hope to see you there.